I was asking myself this question the other day. Does the way that professional wrestlers sell make wrestling look fake? And here's where I'm coming from this, because on the surface, you're like, no, they sell to make it look real. Basically, where it came from was like I kept on seeing these things online. It's like, these guys are killing the business. They don't sell. Selling makes wrestling look realistic. So I'm like, selling makes wrestling look realistic. And I'm watching. I'm like, no, it fucking doesn't. Now, what selling does, selling gives you the ability to tell a great story. It makes the match exciting. It doesn't make it look realistic. Right. Let's be clear on that. Because if you watch any other combat sports, you watch UFC, you watch boxing, when a boxer gets punched in the face with a good punch, he doesn't fucking sell it. He doesn't go into a weeble wobble unless he's about to get knocked the fuck out.
Yeah.
And UFC, if they go with a leg kick, those guys are not selling kicks like Randy Savage after WrestleMania 8. They shrug it off. And in wrestling, you take a body slam and someone says, my back, oh. I can make an argument that makes it look fake. That it makes it not look realistic. Now, the art of selling as an art that's been lost to a certain degree overall, but don't tell me that selling makes wrestling look realistic, because it doesn't. What it does, it enhances the story of the match. It makes it exciting. It does all those things. That's why wrestling should not ever get rid of selling. But to have the argument that makes it look realistic, I think, is a ridiculous statement. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I will say this. I think that the reason you have selling in wrestling as opposed to UFC or MMA, etc., things like that, is that it is not a legit competition.
Right.
So it is a performance. It is theater, whether you like it or not. Now, there are times when they try to make things, more realistic, King of Hearts style, or things like that. It's a physical competitor, clothesline. It has an air of realism, elements of the toughness. But what you're missing is that when somebody gets legit punched, they don't have to sell because they're getting punched. I had a spot one time where the manager of the bad guy I was fighting, Vic Rose, his manager, Backstabbing Bob, was going to punch me with a chain. So backstage, I was like, all right, let's work on this. And I'm trying to show him how to throw a punch, a fake punch, and he kept punching me in the side of the head. It's like, all right, you're gonna stomp me. Let's work on a stomp. So he was kicking me, and I'm like, all right, let's work on you stomping me from the side, the easiest way possible. I think what happens with selling is there needs to be degrees, and I was explaining this the other day in the LWF meeting that you need degrees. For instance, paper cut. A 2, right? Mm-hmm. Stub your toe on a table in the middle of the night, a 4. You go to throw a glass and it hits the wall, breaks open, you slash open your hand, you hit a nerve, you're effed. It's a 7. You fall out of a tree, 8. There's varying levels. Well, same thing in wrestling. If you sell an arm bar the same way you sell a figure 4 leg lock, well, you're a terrible performer.
Right.
You just are. You have to have levels, and that's why the reason you need selling in wrestling, and like when I was being trained, Killer would always say, okay, someone's giving you a step over toe hold, right? Fight it. Don't just lay there and take it. You're supposed to be fight. It's a fight. Act like you're going to fight them. Don't just take it. And what you see a lot is wrestlers that just basically feed them their leg, feed them the arm, feed them their head. And it looks less legit. Now, I'm not saying that's the end of the world. We've seen John Cena call spots on TV for 20 years now almost. It's just how it goes. But you don't insult my intelligence. I used to always use the example for acting class when I was doing acting training. If I'm in a scene and I've been shot in the arm to start the play, right? So act 1, I run to the room, I have blood pouring down my arm, and I'm holding it. I was shot off screen before it started. And the whole entire play, I'm bleeding, and I talk about fatigue from blood loss. If at the end of the show, I reach for the door with my arm that was shot and pull it open, despite how it's locked, every audience goes, what? Well, it's kind of the same way with wrestling. If you work my arm the whole entire match, and I finish you with a gorilla press slam, and I push you up 3 times, it just looks stupid.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's wrestling. We know that's predetermined. I hate people go, oh, it's fake. If it was fake, my shoulder would look like garbage. It's like, there's a difference, Predetermined, it's like dancing. The better your partner, the better it will look. So if you sell well, You have those degrees. There was a book I had as a kid, and it was Marvel Comics, How to Draw the Marvel Way. And there was this panel, which I always took and equated to wrestling, and it was Spider-Man throwing a punch. And you had him on one side of the page, kind of like reaching as far back as possible, and then on the other side, like delivering the punch, so picture like rearing back, then following through. And that middle zone was what they called the avoid zone. Like, do not, it looks terrible. Killer used to talk about if the fans in the upper bleachers or upper deck can see you winding up, that's good. You want them to see that. Now, as the person delivering it, I want to deliver a very, vivid visual feast for the person watching. If I wind up and I slug you and you don't sell it, it tells you one or two things. Either you have no idea how to sell a move, or B, you're Hulk Hogan and you're hulking up.
Or Road Warrior Hawk.
Or Road Warrior Hawk, yeah.
And I want people to understand the difference between registering and selling. Now,
Right.
You can always register damage. If you get punched, you register the damage. That's when you move your head back and forth. You can go into the long sell on the ground when you're selling your shoulder, you're selling your arm. I think
Right.
from overall performance standpoint, it is extremely necessary, and especially when you talk about a live event that you want everyone from the front row to the guy in the cheap seats seeing what you're doing. So everything's gonna be very exaggerated. Now we're talking about real sports. Boxing, they're not really in it for the entertainment purposes. They're in it to win it. So again, if they get hit, they're not going to have the exaggerated movement. But in terms of it being realistic, no, not necessarily realistic when you're in a competition